Hello and welcome to another episode of Nutanix Weekly. I am your host, Phil Sellers, the practice director for Modern Data Center here at XenTegra. Happy to have you joining us for another episode and another discussion about Nutanix and the ways that it can help your business succeed. This episode is one of 12, I think we have now at XenTegra. We like to call it content with context. And that's because we try to take content from other places like the Nutanix blog that we'll be covering today and then add the real world to it, add our own experiences and our insights to it. So I've got two great Nutanix resources on the line with us today. Mr. Jaira Cox, how are you doing?
Bill, doing well, man. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. And we've also got Ben Rogers. Ben, how you doing, son?
Hey, how are you doing? Long time no see, guys. Glad to be back.
Yeah, it's good to see you. So Jaira and Ben both work for the company, both work for Nutanix. So it's great to have you guys with us today. We've had a lot going on in the Carolinas. For anyone listening, we faced tropical storm, Hurricane Helene. I'm not sure what it was by the time it actually got to us, but we saw the effects of it a lot sooner than the actual eye came through our area. We've got a lot of people across the country that have been affected by that storm. So, how did you guys fare where you're at?
Yeah, thankfully, very grateful to say no effect over here on the Raleigh area. We had a rainy, windy day, but no, totally. Lots of sympathy for folks that are having much more interesting days than we're having today. Hope you guys get through that quickly, and I know my support's already been sent over to toward y'all.
Yeah, we've got team members here at XenTegra that live up in the mountains of North Carolina. Have been participating in rescue efforts and things like that. There's a lot of devastation all throughout the southeastern area. So thoughts and prayers with everybody affected. But we're here to talk about storage. We're here to talk about Nutanix. So let's talk about today's blog post: storage mobility to meet the challenges of hybrid multi-cloud. Hybrid multi-cloud is something I think that we all agree is here to stay. Companies can't get around it. Better or worse, we have hybrid multi-cloud, right? We're doing compute in multiple places, whether that's on-prem, managed service providers, Azure, AWS. We've got multiple places that we're trying to get the job done, trying to get work done. So this blog post was written by Dwayne Lessner. So shout out to Dwayne, Principal Technical Marketing Engineer for Nutanix. And I guess let's dive in. Jaira, you brought this one to the table. Do you want to kick us off with it?
Totally, and of course, thanks as always to our amazing tech marketing team. We have really a embarrassment of riches, right, of great blog posts to choose from right now for what we want to cover. So thanks again to the whole team. We can definitely shout out specifically to Dwayne, I think it's how he pronounces it. So thank you, sir. So today's blog post, talks about, well, the title is Storage Mobility to Meet Challenges of the Hybrid Multi-Cloud. I think, I mean, put very simply, it's like, how do we help you move and adapt your personal hybrid multi-cloud with whatever shape you want it to be and take whatever you want to wherever you want to go, right? Whether that's apps, VMs. We'll touch later on about like some specific Nutanix functions like unified storage, which we covered in deep detail on our last episode. But in general, like, how do we help you keep the shape of your cloud very cloudy and less rigid, right? And adapt it when you want to. The article even starts off by talking about just flexibility required, right? As different things like data growth, like acquisitions, even just inherent IT complexity make things want to change, right? And of course, in some ways, every problem can be solved with the right kind of credit card swipe. And we also know that, you do that enough and you get invited to reevaluate the way you're deploying technology.
Yeah, I mean, the simplicity of the credit card swipe, right?
Yeah.
That's easy, but it induces its own set of problems because those environments, they spin up. They're not necessarily to standards. They don't meet our security requirements, but they're easy, right? And I think that's the underlying thing. When we talk about cloud, it's not a destination; it's a way of doing things, and that way of doing things is actually pretty simplified. It should be easy to consume. It should be easy as swiping that credit card. And that's the goal here with Nutanix infrastructure, is to give you that simplicity, deliver that simplicity of consumption to your customers at the end of the day.
And I think as an IT leader, right, there's a mandate to get that right, because we need to make sure that we need to make it easy for our customers to do the right thing the first time, right? Because some things are brittle enough, are static enough, have enough weight and mass around them. Not looking in the mirror, but I do too. Around, like, let's get it right the first time, because it's hard to go back and solve and change later, right? So when we make doing the right thing the easy thing to do, then more things get done right automatically or on their own power.
So it's interesting. Yeah. I had a conversation this weekend at an event here in Charlotte, and the company was basically telling me their cloud journey started by a developer not wanting to wait on infrastructure. And so he started doing cloud infrastructure, did more and more and more. And the next thing they know, they've got, workload that's sitting in cloud that they're now responsible for securing. And that was the start of their cloud journey, as this developer just got way ahead of himself. Before he knew it, had multiple projects in the cloud, and they were playing catch up. And they're struggling to get, consistency between on-prem and cloud. And so it sounds like, not reading too much of this, because we're supposed to read it while we're going through it. It sounds like that we're able to solve some of those consistency problems and give you a platform that will allow you to do both on-prem and cloud if need to be, or migrate between the two if need to be. So I thought it was interesting that not all organizations have their clouds defined for them. It's usually sometimes a reaction to something that's happened in their environment, like with this particular customer. They had no cloud plan until their developer got tired of waiting on people.
Well, totally. I think that's actually a pretty common sort of scenario, right? The barrier to entry is really low. And we get into this situations where we have traditionally taken too long to deliver resources to our constituents, as infrastructure folks. And that is frustrating. They're trying to write code and get the job done at the end of the day. But this is where we also need the other pieces that are required of us, required by compliance, required by business, by just good stewardship of the data and resources we're given by our business partners. We have to do the right thing around this. And that may not be front of mind when you're just going out and starting to consume things. But there's also the skills gap, right? And we'll talk more about all these other concerns, but there's that skills gap, right? And I think you highlighted it there, Ben. A lot of traditional infrastructure teams, they're not necessarily equipped to just inherit a cloud deployment and then know what to do from a governance standpoint, security standpoint. These things operate differently than our traditional infrastructure has. Or does it? And maybe that's where the solution is in all of this. So let's trek on a little bit here in the blog post. And, we go on to learn, and I think we've talked about it many times here on the podcast, but Nutanix cloud clusters, at the end of the day, it's the same software that you run on-prem. And so let's talk a little bit more about NC2 as a solution for that consistent operating environment, no matter the destination. Jairo, I'll throw it to you.
Sure. So simplified diagram here at the top of the blog post covering, kind of three corners of the triangle from on-prem to hyperscalers, right? Think about Azure, think about AWS, right? Your favorite standard quote cloud unquote, right? Like traditional cloud, what people think of when they hear about that. And of course, service providers, right? And in reality, of course, with Nutanix, with our software platform, all three of these things can become your cloud platform. It's a matter of, do you want to, have hardware you own that lives in four walls that you own? Do you want it to be hardware you own in four walls that you rent access to, or hardware you rent in data centers that you also rent access to, right? All these things are possible, right? A matter of how do you want to get deployed. But how does using the software platform then let you adapt and evolve the underlying substrate as you don't have to evolve and keep offering consistency to the business, right? So I still vend VMs, I still vend security, governance, optimization, visibility, right, or observability, responsible economics, as I can revisit any of these things, right, depending on economic factors, laws of physics, right? I need things closer to other things. I need, not to be put too fine a point on it, but when like major freak storms happen, right? I need to move workloads out of their path. In some ways that some of us here in the Carolinas are probably a little bit jealous of. I wish I could just like wake up tomorrow and be across the country. How do I offer that kind of mobility to the business with consistency of the platform that they're consuming, right? Which of course can be the Nutanix platform itself. So that workload mobility is, and I believe this, Dwayne calls it out explicitly, is going to be a persistent requirement, right? The only constant is change, right? So there's nothing that we can trust is going to stay that way forever. How do we adapt and move? Or we use the dumb analogy sometimes of like, rebuild the wings on the airplane as we fly it, or change all the tires on the bus as it rolls down the road. So what can we do without causing disruption? As we actually are doing major work under the covers to then re-platform things, to move things, to reshape things. And so, of course, an easy one, right, is using public cloud resources, right, including, let's say, using bare metal nodes, like call them just what they are, servers, from cloud providers with Nutanix as a DR site, right? I can have my workloads in one site, replicate them to the other. And of course, when needed, just activate them, replicate them over, power them up. Boom, I've accomplished my DR objectives. The rest of this will walk through some other ways that you might want to do that a little bit differently. But at a base level, of course, that's one thing you can do is just flat out run Nutanix in public cloud as a DR or even live data center placement.
Well, I think that's a great place for us to start is that data mobility part of the discussion. So we're talking about DR, which uses native replication features inside of the Nutanix platform. That's not the only way that we can talk about data mobility. I mean, Ben, there's a great tool. We talk about it a lot with customers, and that's Nutanix Move. That's a huge advantage, a huge feather in the Nutanix cap too.
Well, and that's a Swiss Army knife, because that not only takes you from Nutanix to Nutanix, but it can take you from several different competitors that we have into Nutanix. So whether you need to come from ESX into Nutanix or some of the cloud providers are into Nutanix, it gives us a way to basically, where do you need to come from and how can we absorb you into this? Another thing I would like to say is specifically to the diagram that was provided to us here is the different types of storage platforms that we have. It's just not volume and block. We can do object stores now. And we're handling unstructured data and giving security around that. So it might not be, you might run one data type in one data center and need to leverage another data type in cloud or third party or disaster recovery. And you see here how he's got one data center running one type of storage, and in another data center he's offloading into object stores. So again, it's not just the one size fits all. We have the flexibility to be able to go, what flavor do you need to see because of your operational restraints? And we have the ability to deliver that.
Yeah, and it's a great call out, right? This is a unified platform with lots of different ways to consume. But the one thing it's not is Hotel California, right? It's easy to get in, but it's hard to get out. Nutanix, it's easy to move that data around. And I think that's one of the key features we're talking about here with hybrid multi-cloud is the data portability around all those different locations. So the blog calls it out a little bit further up, but if you've got a cost advantage of one provider over another, well, it's easy to move. Just move that data using native services, and you get the advantage of that better pricing from provider X. or let's call it provider Y. You get to consume on your terms, and you get the independence of being able to migrate things as needed. That's not the only sort of advantage. And actually, before I go there, we're talking about Move here. There's another great use case for Nutanix Move, and that is customers trying to migrate away from VMware Cloud on AWS into NC2. It's a great pathway for you to move from a very similar sort of technology stack where there's some difficulties going on right now in terms of licensing and relationships between Broadcom and AWS. So, if you're looking for a good partnership, NC2 on AWS is a great place to relocate those workloads as well.
And one of the, I would say, easiest ways to even try out Nutanix, right? You're already running your workloads in a in a hardware and software as a service environment. That would be a complete like for like match of I can go spin up a new cluster for a few more nodes paid for by the hour, try that out. I think the Nutanix part of that even is offered as a free trial, right? So you're just paying for the cloud instances and move copies of your VMs over without even disrupting them or turning them off if you wanted to, right? And test out what would it look like to run this workload, this VM on Nutanix as well. One of the easiest ways to take a test drive, it'd be akin to on vacation in a city, I can call up an Uber or a Lyft and see that car that I think I might want to buy, with zero commitment and no warning instantly.
Yeah, and
exactly.
This is not rocket science. I mean, I just did a demo of the migration plan. So, I mean, basically your source would be an ESX or an AWS or Azure or something like that. And then your target would be the Nutanix cluster. What Move does for you is it does all the virtual hardware mapping for you. So when you go to convert that thing from one format to another, we're taking care of all that for you. And then to Jaira's point, you can set these things in a test bubble. So you can actually create a migration plan, let the VM migrate over and keep the original VM running and test in a bubble the new VM configuration once it comes over. So Move does a lot of cool things for you and takes care of a lot of the underlying infrastructure with the virtual hardware that you just don't have to worry about, man. Just basically point it to the environment. It'll do the conversion for you. And then in the end, people go, okay, I've got the VM on the ESX side and I got the VM over on the HV side. We have a cutoff period. So we'll keep the data in sync for you until a given time. And then when you have a small outage window, we'll do a last sync and then bring that VM on the AHV side. We won't destroy the VM on the ESX side. We'll just down it for the period until you make sure that everything is successful. So Move handles a lot of the migration tasks for the engineering and creates a good migration plan that can be repeatable as you get successful with some workloads and need to move other workloads over.
Well, and I think that follows the common story here, which is simplicity and orchestration. And that's one of the tenets, and I try to talk about it often, from day one, day two, ongoing. That's one of the major underlying features of the Nutanix platform is that simplicity and orchestration. It's easy to add a node. It's easy to upgrade the nodes. It's easy to handle any one of these sort of day two operations, which kind of brings us to another day two operation. These bare metal nodes are not necessarily stuck with a finite configuration when it comes to storage anymore. Jair, do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So perhaps in the past, folks that have tried out our NC2 offering, right, have shown it's very easy to buy, hey, do you want the small, the medium, the large, right? They're right off the rack. How many do you want to make your cluster? Well, what if you're like a schmedium, right, and need something kind of in the middle there, right? How do I get something that's kind of right sized for me when I just need more, let's say, like storage? So, of course, these are regular servers in who knows what data centers living somewhere in the cloud. There's literally no amount of money you can pay a human to go and like pop more disks into them the way you would, like, of course, your nodes in your data center. So what's cool here is we actually use a similar principle to to solve for this kind of problem, right? With like, what can we get as a service, right? So of course, in Amazon, we can use EBS, right? Elastic Block Storage that is also available in cloud data centers to then present more additional block storage to that node. Again, all defined in software, all as a service. So this is more akin to like, think back to when we would have a node that might be like, say, NVMe hot tier with SSD colder, quote, quote, tier. SSD is still pretty darn fast, right? But it is not quite as fast as NVMe on a megabyte for megabyte basis. So now this node can have all the internal storage it already had before, can also have additional block storage, also living in the Amazon data center as well, presented as local storage. The CVM sees it all, our Nutanix controller VM sees it all, and aggregates all of that just as if it was additional disks living inside of that node. And of course, our original bit of technical wizardry from 15 years ago, right? Profiling VM workloads, placing the very hottest data on the very most local, highest performing storage, letting other more randomly accessed data live elsewhere in the cluster. In this case, can be even on block storage in the cloud provider there. Now we can bring more storage to bear than even what fits into the node itself. Right, that lets our customers now fit even more economical DR use cases. Go back to our framing device of, let's say you need to solve for DR and you've chosen to use cloud to do it. Now, if I needed, say, 10 nodes before to fit my storage capacity I wanted out of my cluster, maybe I can get by with 3 nodes with more storage attached to those things and not need as many nodes involved at the party just to hit a storage target when those nodes are mostly going to be asleep being DR hosts, right? They normally wouldn't be running VMs and be very busy. So wonderful, both I think actually very cool technical level of solution, but also huge financial punchline there on why would I care about it? Why would I use it? What does it look like to run this kind of environment at scale?
So at this point, crowd, we're hitting the awesomeness button because that's awesome technology is being worked here. Add storage on the fly and not add clusters.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too. Like, as we talk about this, we're talking about block storage, but that's only the interface coming into the host. So we can take that block storage and then we can make it used as object and file on top of it. And that's the next section of the blog post here. As we keep trucking in awesomeness, just to quote Ben, we were talking about file services and scale out file services on NC2. And you also have the ability to now do that on native EC2 or Amazon Elastic Compute instances as well. So that's the next great feature, is that you get file services not even necessarily on the Nutanix platform, but on native cloud services, and it's your choice.
100%. Yeah. So I can think of one great use case for this, actually with a customer we all know that uses the cloud for their DR target for VDI, right? Where those profiles need to be replicating all the time, but the actual hypervisor level running those desktops is going to be asleep most of the time outside of a test or a live failover environment. And so that ability to pick a certain kind of workload, like in this case, Nutanix files, operating as that SMB NFS unstructured data host, can now run outside the cluster, right, in a more economical, more effective way to deploy that and not have that be the workload that sort of keeps my cluster larger than it needs to be most of the time, is super efficient for customers, right? So that means I can now run just files if I wanted to have cloud be my DR target just for the files workload, or have that run next to a smaller cluster as well if I needed, say, both like file replication for my profiles and vdisk replication for my gold master images or persistent desktops or server VMs or things of that nature. So yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful new feature with that ability to run files now natively on cloud itself. Your choice as a customer, either on Nutanix in cloud or next to Nutanix in cloud.
I think what this shows is just our company's commitment to being a cloud provider platform and being able to roll out individual services and not have to take the whole portfolio. And so this is where I really see our commitment to going, okay, we know that cloud platforms are a portfolio of products and a portfolio of services, and here's our commitment to delivering the services the way our customers need to consume it, not the Nutanix way, but the customer way with simplicity and flexibility. And so that's really what I see this whole files and native cloud being is just our commitment to bring flexibility to our customers to how they need to consume our data services.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting that you've now decoupled from your core infrastructure, which is a first time sort of feature. There's hint, hint, nudge, nudge, more to come in the future, but this is a good use case, as you pointed out, that serves a lot of different things. But we're creating tons and tons of data at the edge. Well, guess what? Usual suspects. You can use Move to migrate that data from the edge into these consolidated cloud instances. And then you can do that in iterations and sequence those things. And the blog post starts to talk about all of the other things that you gain as an advantage now that you've migrated into Nutanix files. So you've got that data portability we talked about. Smart DR also comes up as another feature. Now, what's the difference between Smart DR and the native sort of block sort of DR that's built into Nutanix?
So yeah, both can be used to solve problems, right, and keep that file server available, right, when things go bump or when we have some kind of a site denial style of event. We've always been able to replicate file servers themselves under the covers, right, at the storage layer, send them to other clusters for recovery. Smart DR, of course, is almost a higher level of abstraction, higher level of functionality, where now we have running file servers on both sides that just call each other, send their own data from one to another, right? Versus like, it's almost like in-app replication versus like storage replication. So yeah, for sure, it's both are available, both can be used to definitely solve problems and meet customer requirements. But that ability to have both running for even lower RPOs, better SLAs, faster failovers is huge. One use case I'm sure we've all I know we all have met customers with this kind of challenge where like I have workloads at the edge. Those sites have, say call it 10 megabit connection back to the data center, but they have 100 megabit out to the internet, right? Or even faster, right? Because with a cable modem, they can go really fast these days, but that might not get very fast back to my corporate data center. As we think about the way next generation applications are shaped, right, where they're going to run in containers, they're going to want data storage. How would I use cloud effectively as DR for those things? Well, now I can imagine a very consistent operation where I have containers that run at the edge. Of course, I can run containers in cloud. I can have files at the edge and data services at the edge that can protect itself to cloud, and none of that has to even traverse my corporate data centers, right? I can actually use cloud effectively now as edge protection with granular recovery for just the workloads it needs. And I'm not, hitting that mosquito with a bazooka just to check the box and say, yes, it's protected, right? So it's very, very right-sized, very economical.
I like that one. I don't know that I've ever tried to shoot a mosquito with a bazooka. But
I mean,
that does sound
normally
fun.
not recommended for close proximity mosquitoes.
The other thing about that edge data too is it's generally got some sort of information that we're trying to make use of, and so that's another great use case for EC2 GPU related instances where we can start to do data processing, AI, machine learning on that data. So now that it's close to or inside of an NC2 cluster, it definitely makes it easier to do that. What additional advantages can you think of around that sort of AI ML use case, Ben?
Well, I mean, I'm personally working with a customer that's introducing AI, and man, it's putting stress on their edge infrastructure. And so in some places they've looked at upgrading the infrastructure, and in other places they've looked at doing like a third party, like a performance hub, where they have a super fast cluster in cloud, and they're sending a lot of that out in the cloud to be processed so that it's not drowning their edge deployment. So that's been one interesting way to see how could we leverage the Nutanix product set in cloud to help build performance behind it. And man, they're having some good success with it of offloading those workloads. We've had other customers that have said, man, the workloads are going to continue to get intense on edge. We need edge to do more than just VMs. So now with our clusters, we're able to do AI, files, traditional VMs, and man, we're getting into the container space pretty heavy. So we're able to go to those clusters. We're able to go to those customers. You don't necessarily have to increase your footprint, your hardware footprint. Let's just increase the services that are going along in those clusters. And if we have to add footprint, it's a commodity item. You're not having to go out and reinvent the wheel. Let's add another node, less expensive nodes. And so really two ways to slice, but again, the granularity of our product and the flexibility and simplicity of our product are giving our customers different ways to solve problems as they're presented as AI is coming onto the scene. We're still in the infancy of AI's deployment. So as we see more and more of this, trust that Nutanix is going to be able to adjust and go forward with those loads.
Yeah, so like for most customers, AI right now, right, usually involves where can I get GPUs, bring data close to that, and then execute, right? That can be the edge, because most of the data, to your point, Phil, comes from the edge, right? If I'm looking at packaging inspection, surveillance footage, inference, the data comes from the edge. It's a matter of, can I do AI at the edge? Which is always possible, right? It gets into hardware lead times, power cooling. Do I want to run something that can run more like a data center grade node at the edge? If you can, great, that's fantastic. If I can't, I can think of one other way to use this, which would be, how do I get data from the edge to the cloud where I know I can, of course, run AI models and make that useful, right? So that ability to use Nutanix as a data pipeline for that kind of use case gets very interesting very, very fast. Whether I want to do lightweight inference on my data or even use my data as a new training data set, which of course will be like for training, that's a pretty much only in the cloud type of workload, right? Because I just need to bring, dizzying amounts of GPU together all at once for a period of time, and then give it all back, right? Very much a bursty rent versus buy type of workload.
Well, and Ben, you also brought up the containerized workloads, and so that's the other benefit here. You've got integrated container storage interfaces, CSI drivers for Kubernetes, to make use of volumes and files inside of Nutanix. You've also got the object stores that we talked about, which is another cloud native sort of technology. So many applications are written to consume S3 compatible object storage. So all of those things become an advantage for you, because to the earlier point one of you guys made, we're running cloud infrastructure at the end of the day. And so cloud infrastructure, when we think of that as a component of lots of different services, and so you don't have to consume them all, but you do have availability to all these different services to be able to turn on and turn off as your business needs. So as we kind of trek on towards this, we'll talk a little bit more about the use cases. I mentioned object storage. There's a lot here in terms of object store. Gives some information, some background. Again, that Nutanix object storage is S3 compatible, meaning it talks the same as AWS S3. But when we talk about use cases for object store, we've hinted at DR for an NC2 use case, but backup really comes into play with object store. It's one of the first use cases, I think, for many customers. It's an easy, attainable sort of workload. What are the advantages there for running object store for your backups?
Well, I would even expand it to say like using Nutanix for backups as well, right? Because then I can deploy Nutanix unified storage, right? Whether that includes files for SMB NFS or the S3 for the object side of the house, right? Mm-hmm. Now I really have an omnivorous ability to ingest data, right? Whatever that looks like. Is it backups, giant monolithic files generated by a backup platform? Is it log data ingestion or other files that like sort of need corporate governance around them? I can just simply say yes to however my customers, my tenants want to consume that, replicate all of that really up to cloud for like that sort of honoring that 3-2-1 backup rule.
I'm cracking up over here. We've got an awesomeness button from Ben. We've now got an omnivorous button from Jira. I think I got that right anyway.
Yeah.
But it is to Ben's point earlier. I think you called it a Swiss Army knife, right?
Yeah.
It really fits so many different use cases. And again, it's the same platform, and that's the power of software.
Yeah. So that, I can say yes to whatever my application requires. Like I can ingest the data, replicate it for a second copy of it, tier it to cloud. So I only hold the latest, most interesting data and other things I need to retain for a longer period of time. I can just send that somewhere else, cheaper and deeper, let it age out there, and then retire it. Really becomes more like a data pipeline that I can now deploy wherever I need to easily.
Well, and I don't think it's an either or kind of conversation. It's not a you have to use Nutanix Object or you have to use Wasabi or you have to use S3. It is compatible to all. So to your point, that tiering is an incredible, I doubt many customers are going to take the steps to do a object-based tape repository like Glacier. But that's a great place for long-term retention to live, is object-fronted tape. And so, being able to get it into this format where it then becomes portable again, that supports that open sort of data migration use case for customers.
Yeah, your cutting edge enterprise architects right now are thinking in terms of data services, not data storage systems, right? Like I need to offer this kind of service for this kind of application in this location, not I need to go buy a box with this logo on it and configure these ports and turn it up and allow these firewall rules. It's much more diverse and kind of fluid than that, right? So that ability to kind of follow data where it needs to go, host it where it needs to be hosted, and maintain it for a full life cycle. Yeah, it's fully much more extensible than systems in the past.
Well, I have to talk about backups and immutability, right? That's one of the other huge advantages to using Object Store. We're all seeking some level of ransomware protection. This is a great strategy for you. Again, using common tools to make things happen. And now you've mitigated some of your ransomware risk. Notice I didn't say you solved anything. You've mitigated some of your risk, but immutable backups is really important because if you don't have good backups and something happens, you then have to pay the ransom, and none of us want to be caught in that situation.
Yeah, at the risk of making a very deep statement, the platform needs to make it easy for good people to do good things, hard for bad people to do bad things, right? Which is kind of a duh statement. But that's where my mind goes when you mention like the importance of like worm policy governance, ransomware protection for a backup system. It's like I want to make it as easy as possible to write my backups. That's like literally the job. But I also want to make it very hard for a bad guy to delete my backups. That's bad, right? And this is like, again, I disclaimed it. This is very deep stuff. It's bad to have bad guys delete your backups. But how do we make sure that it's bad? It's hard for bad guys to do bad things. Well, these kind of policies help us out there, right? Where if I can have a policy that says this backup has to be retained for 30 days and can't be deleted, no matter even if I approve it, right? You need to have me and somebody else approve it before we can do that, or no one's allowed to approve that, right? Don't allow it. That matters. That matters an awful lot. Or when I have this kind of event happen, I want to detect it as fast as possible, snapshot it, so that I have the forensic analysis available to me, but I also want to get the business up and running as fast as possible from a prior known good, healthy state of my data. And all these things are not only possible on Nutanix, most of them are actually automated out of the box.
And that's your point there, Jaira, is really key to our platform. Could you go do this in other platforms? Of course, but you might be having to look at your storage platform. You might have to look at your monitoring compliance platform. And we've really built that from nuts to bolts where you can sit inside of our management screen and see these anomalous activities and rectify it if you need to. And so I think the ability to monitor, I think the ability to look at strange activity when it's going on, and the ability just to report back to the organization, hey, this is what's happening in your environment. I'm working with a customer that observability is a big thing for them, and age of data is a big thing for them. And we're able to basically inventory their environment, tell them what the age of their data is, what they're doing with that data, and is there some probability that they're not using data that could be tiered off, or better yet, just destroyed and gone because it's no longer used to the company. So that flexibility there, and again, our commitment to deliver those tools to our customers, I think is what's really making us shine in the marketplace right now, specifically with this,
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of goodness. Honestly, when we started down this blog post, this is packed full. I mean, this is every paragraph has some new feature, some way that you can leverage the platform for good, to quote you, Jaira, for good inside of your businesses and help mitigate some of the bad. There's so much here. And again, underscoring kind of the premise of this, it's the same no matter where you choose to run it. If you run it in hyperscale, if you run it on-prem, if you run it with a service provider, it is the same. So I will say things are getting busy around me here at the event I'm attending. So I think we may end up having to wrap it up on that note, guys.
Yeah. Dwayne, if you're listening, you heard Phil say it, shorter blog posts, please.
This is a hard one.
Well, this had a lot of meat on the bone, right? Yeah. These were good ribs. So there's a lot to dig into, and we do appreciate it. Again, to the entire tech marketing team that gives us good content to talk about, we appreciate you. And to everybody listening, hopefully you took away a couple of ideas of how you can leverage this with your hybrid multi-cloud strategy. And as always, I wanted to say thanks to Jaira and Ben. Appreciate your time and appreciate you joining us on the podcast. And for everybody listening, we hope you'll join us on another episode very, very soon.